It had been weeks since the court hearings with Judge Boasberg, and if there was one thing I knew about Donald Trump, it was that he wasn't a man who took defeat lightly. He had been planning his next move, and this time, it was going to be different. This time, it wasn't about the fight on the surface, it was the battle beneath. I sat in the conference room of his Mar-a-Lago estate, the luxurious surroundings almost too perfect to be real, yet the atmosphere inside was anything but serene. Trump paced, his fingers drumming on the back of the leather chair as he muttered to himself, deep in thought. Boasberg thinks he's got me cornered, he grumbled, his face tight with frustration. But he's wrong. Very wrong. I'll show him who's really in charge. I leaned forward, watching as the wheels turned in his head, knowing something was coming, a plan that would make all the others look like child's play. Trump didn't just want to win, he wanted to make Boasberg regret ever crossing him. He stopped pacing suddenly, a grin spreading across his face. It's time. Let's set the trap. I could feel the tension in the room shift. It wasn't just business as usual anymore. This was personal. The trap was set. Trump's mind worked like a machine, every cog clicking into place. He knew how to exploit the system, how to push the boundaries of the law to get what he wanted, and this time, Boasberg was going to walk right into it. We're going to play him like a fiddle, Trump said, his voice low, almost excited. Boasberg thinks he's untouchable, that his little rulings will keep me in check. But he doesn't know who he's dealing with. I've been on the other side of the law long enough to know how to turn the tables. I watched as he scribbled notes on a legal pad, outlining the steps of his strategy with the precision of a seasoned chess player. His plan involved not just public battles but quiet legal maneuvers, moves that would leave Boasberg no room to maneuver. He wasn't just going after Boasberg's decisions, he was going after the man's reputation. Trump's legal team had been quietly gathering dirt, preparing a dossier that would shake Boasberg's credibility to its core. Once they had the right leverage, the real fun would begin. We're going to hit him where it hurts the most, Trump said, looking up from his notes. Boasberg may be a judge, but he's not invincible. Everyone has skeletons, and it's about time we exposed his. The plan was set into motion almost immediately. Legal briefs were filed, accusations were whispered in the right ears, and behind-the-scenes allies were contacted. Trump had set his sights on Boasberg, and there was no turning back now. It didn't take long before the first part of Trump's trap fell into place. A subtle leak hit the media, a carefully crafted rumor about Boasberg's past connections, ties that could be seen as compromising. It wasn't overt, it was all just suggestions, insinuations. But in the world of politics and law, that's all it took. The rumor mill churned, and soon, whispers about Boasberg's integrity were everywhere. Trump leaned back in his chair, watching the storm unfold from his command center in Mar-a-Lago. He had been right. The moment the first report surfaced, Boasberg's credibility began to waver. No one was accusing him directly, but the implication was clear: was the judge as impartial as he appeared? You see. This is how it works, Trump said, a triumphant edge to his voice. It's not about the facts. It's about perception. And once the perception shifts, the damage is done. He picked up his phone, dialing someone from his legal team. I want more leaks. Nothing major. Just a few more whispers. Boasberg needs to feel the heat. The public needs to start questioning him. As the media continued to spiral, Trump set his eyes on the next phase of the plan. The dossier of Boasberg's potential missteps, both public and private, was in the final stages. It was time for the real damage to begin. We'll go public with it soon, Trump continued, flipping through the documents on his desk. The media won't be able to ignore us. Once they're talking, we'll move in for the kill. The trap was closing in around Boasberg, and it was only a matter of time before he was caught in its snare. By the time Trump's team was ready to drop the final bombshell, the public pressure on Boasberg had already reached a boiling point. The whispers had turned into shouts, and rumors of his questionable associations were now headlines. It was no longer just a court case, it had become a full-blown spectacle. Trump was watching every move. He had seen enough battles to know that timing was everything. This wasn't about rushing the attack, it was about hitting at the perfect moment, when Boasberg's reputation was dangling on the edge of a cliff. "They're waiting for the scandal to hit," Trump said, his voice full of satisfaction. "The media, the public, they want something big. And that's exactly what we're going to give them." The final move was in place. The legal team had compiled a damning report on Boasberg's past interactions with controversial figures. It was a thick document, full of details that would raise serious questions about the judge's impartiality. Trump knew that once it was in the hands of the right journalists, it would spread like wildfire. The plan was simple but devastating: leak the report to the media at the most opportune moment, just as the public's doubts were at their peak. And then, Trump would unleash a full-court press. No more subtlety, no more insinuations. It was time to turn up the heat. "I'm going to have my people push it out tomorrow," Trump said, his eyes cold and focused. By the end of the week, Boasberg will be scrambling to save his career. It's over for him. He won't know what hit him. As the pieces fell into place, I couldn't help but feel a sense of inevitability. The trap was sprung. The outcome was sealed. Boasberg didn't even know what was coming for him. The moment of reckoning came sooner than expected. Trump's legal team had done their job, and the carefully crafted leak hit the media with the force of a wrecking ball. The report on Boasberg's questionable ties to powerful, controversial figures was out in the open, and it was a bombshell. The media had a field day, running with the story and painting Boasberg as a compromised judge, one whose impartiality could no longer be trusted. Trump watched the news unfold, a satisfied grin creeping across his face. He knew this would be the turning point, the moment where Boasberg's career could be derailed beyond repair. As the headlines exploded, Trump's team went into overdrive, pushing out statements, holding press conferences, and ensuring the story stayed at the forefront of the public's mind. "I told you it would work," Trump said, picking up his phone. "Make sure this stays on top. I want Boasberg's name dragged through the mud for the next few weeks. Every time his name comes up, it needs to remind people of this report." But it wasn't just about the headlines anymore. Trump had a more personal vendetta. The media frenzy wasn't enough. He wanted Boasberg in the spotlight, scrambling for answers, forced to defend himself in front of the world. The judge tried to keep a level head, issuing vague denials and promising an internal review, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. The public's trust in him was slipping, and the legal world was beginning to question his judgment. Trump had succeeded in planting the seed of doubt, and now, the rest of Boasberg's downfall was all but inevitable. The public would demand answers, and Boasberg would be left fighting for his career while Trump, ever the opportunist, waited to see what came next. But even in his victory, Trump was already thinking ahead. This wasn't just about Boasberg, it was about setting the stage for the next chapter. With the media and the public eating out of his hand, who would be next? As the days wore on, the fallout from Trump's move against Boasberg only intensified. The legal community was abuzz with speculation, and Boasberg's colleagues began to distance themselves from him. His credibility had been shattered, and the whispers of scandal were now turning into accusations. Public figures, once supportive, started to pull their endorsements. His very position as a federal judge was at risk. Trump, of course, was thriving in the chaos. He reveled in the sight of Boasberg scrambling to put out fires. Every press conference Boasberg gave only seemed to make things worse. He could no longer deny the weight of the accusations hanging over him. But Trump wasn't satisfied with just watching from the sidelines. He wanted to make sure Boasberg's fall was as spectacular as possible. So he decided to escalate the pressure, turning up the heat on Boasberg at every opportunity. "Make sure we're everywhere," Trump instructed his media team. "Get this out on every network, every platform. I want to see Boasberg sweating. I want the public to see him squirm." Trump's influence over the media was undeniable. His team worked tirelessly to ensure that the story remained in the spotlight, casting Boasberg as a judge with questionable ethics. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it had become a full-blown political spectacle. Even more damning reports began to surface, including anonymous sources within the judicial system who claimed Boasberg had been involved in controversial decisions that could be traced back to his connections. Each new revelation made Boasberg's position more untenable. And then, just as Trump had planned, the final blow landed. A whistleblower came forward, claiming to have direct knowledge of Boasberg's corrupt dealings. The evidence was shocking, hard to dismiss, even for the most staunch defenders of the judicial system. The story broke like wildfire, and within hours, calls for Boasberg's resignation began pouring in from across the political spectrum. Trump watched the chaos unfold with a mix of satisfaction and amusement. His plan had worked flawlessly. Boasberg, once a respected judge, was now a pariah. His future was in jeopardy, and the public couldn't stop talking about it. But as Boasberg's career crumbled, Trump's ambitions had already moved to the next phase. The snare for Boasberg had been set, but the next target was already in sight. Boasberg's fall from grace was swift and brutal. The media circus had reached its climax, and now it was time for the final act. Calls for his resignation were everywhere, from senators, from legal experts, even from his own colleagues. His position was untenable, and there was no way he could salvage his reputation after the explosive revelations. Trump sat back, eyes glinting with satisfaction. He had orchestrated a masterpiece of legal and media warfare, and now it was all coming to fruition. Boasberg, once a formidable figure in the judicial system, was now a joke. The public had lost all faith in him, and no amount of denial could undo the damage that had been done. "I told you, once the trap is set, there's no escape," Trump said, his voice tinged with amusement. He thought he was untouchable, but he wasn't. And now, he'll have to live with the consequences. As Boasberg's resignation became more and more inevitable, Trump's team went into full damage control mode. The legal ramifications were still unclear, but one thing was certain: Boasberg's career in the federal judiciary was over. The media was already focusing on what would come next, who would replace him, who would rise from the ashes of his scandal. Trump had already put his name forward as a strong advocate for reform in the judicial system, subtly positioning himself as a defender of integrity in the legal world. But even as the focus shifted to Boasberg's inevitable exit, Trump wasn't letting up. He continued to push his agenda, ensuring that Boasberg's downfall remained in the public consciousness. The trap had worked, but the game was far from over. Trump's influence had only grown. With Boasberg out of the picture, new opportunities arose. There were whispers about the next judge, the next case that could give Trump the upper hand. His ability to turn the tables on his opponents, to control the narrative and strike when least expected, had become a well-honed skill. Boasberg's fall wasn't just a victory for Trump, it was a demonstration of his power. He had shown the world that no one was above the reach of his influence, and anyone who thought they could stand against him would eventually be brought to their knees. As Trump prepared for his next move, there was a certain satisfaction in his tone. The snare had worked, Boasberg was out. But as always, Trump's mind was already racing toward the next game, the next fight. Boasberg's resignation came just days after the final leak. The news was everywhere, dominating headlines across the country. The once respected judge, brought down by a series of carefully orchestrated revelations, was now a cautionary tale. The public had moved on to the next scandal, but Trump knew the game was far from over. As the dust settled, Trump gathered his team once more, reflecting on the chaotic sequence of events that had led to Boasberg's downfall. The victory wasn't just in Boasberg's resignation, it was in the way Trump had manipulated the system, used the media, and turned the tide in his favor. Once again, he had proven that no one, not even the most powerful figures in the judicial system, could stand against him for long. "It's all about timing, knowing when to push and when to pull back," Trump said, his voice steady and calculating. "Boasberg thought he could keep me down. But I always know when to make my move." But as he spoke, I could tell that his mind was already shifting to the future. The next target, the next move, the next battle. Trump wasn't one to rest on his laurels. His ambition, his hunger for power, had only grown stronger through this victory. Boasberg's just one piece, Trump added, looking out over the horizon from his office window. The game doesn't end with him. The real work is just beginning. With that, he turned away from the window, and his eyes met mine. There was a look of quiet determination in them, a look that told me he wasn't done yet. This was just another chapter in his long, unyielding war. The traps he set, the people he brought down, the ways he manipulated the system, it was all part of the larger picture. The snare for Boasberg had been expertly laid and executed. But for Trump, this was just the beginning of a much larger play. And as for Boasberg, he was gone, his career in ruins. Trump's grip on power had tightened just a little more. The snare had closed.